My name is Annie Claude and I'm an Extension Associate at Penn State. Today we'll be talking about harvest weed seed control. What is it, what are the techniques involved with it, and how do they work? And today I'll be talking with Dr. Michael Flessner, who's a weed scientist at Virginia Tech. Dr. Flessner's lab researches harvest weed seed control methods for farmers to tackle problem weeds.
Well, harvest weed seed control is the process of controlling weed seeds before they are spread back out into the field as they exit the back of the combine. We know that a harvester is in fact capable of dispersing weeds very well through a field, from field to field, and from farm to farm. So these techniques all try to capture those weed seeds as they come out of the back of the combine and either remove them or physically destroy them so that they are non-viable and do not contribute to further weed problems in that field.
Why is your group researching harvest weed seed control?
We're interested in exploring harvest weed seed control techniques mainly as a response to herbicide resistant weeds. We've got to find techniques that are easily adoptable and can be integrated into our current cropping systems. And I think these are some techniques, or a group of techniques, that meet those criteria. Specifically, we're looking at narrow windrow burning as well as chaff cart removal because they have a low adoption threshold. That is, they do not require a large capital expense and can be easily and cheaply implemented on our farms in Virginia and in the Mid-Atlantic region.
What is narrow windrow burning?
Well, narrow windrow burning is one harvest weed seed control technique where the field residues that exit the back of the combine are placed into a windrow and then they are subsequently burned, the burning which has a high enough heat, duration of heat, that it actually kills any weed seeds that are contained in that windrow.
What special equipment is required for windrow burning, and how does it work?
It's very easy for a farmer to modify their combine to form a narrow windrow. Simply take the spreader and or chopper off of the back of the combine, build some sort of chute apparatus so that the residues will fall down into a narrow windrow.
How hot does it get in the windrows?
Inside the windrows we observe temperatures generally in excess of 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly in the range of 900 to 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest temperature we observed was 1650 degrees Fahrenheit. Research indicates that about 800 to 900 degrees Fahrenheit is required to kill most weed seeds in 10 seconds. We definitely achieved this in most of our windrows. The lowest temperature we observed was when we were trying to burn wet residue, and that resulted in about 550 degrees Fahrenheit, which was sufficient to kill most weed seeds in 10 seconds, but we did have issues maintaining the burning through the length of the windrow, so a farmer would have to come back and relight these wet windrows, which is one of the challenges with narrow windrow burning.
What's the difference between burning windrows and burning the whole field to kill weed seeds?
The difference between whole field burning of wheat stubble and narrow windrow burning of wheat stubble is that we concentrate the fuel in the windrows, and therefore we get higher temperatures and we get a longer duration of temperatures, which we don't get when we burn an entire field. That's important because that's what we need to kill the weed seeds in those windrows, is we need them exposed to generally 800 to 900 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 seconds to kill all those weed seeds. We can achieve that in narrow windrow burning. Most of the time we do not achieve that when we burn the entire field.
What should farmers consider before trying narrow windrow burning?
One consideration of narrow windrow burning is the width of the windrow. Research indicates that the windrow should be about 10% or less of the header width. So if you have a 30-foot header, you need a windrow that is 3 foot in width or less. Another consideration with narrow windrow burning, as well as any other technique that removes crop residues or chaff from the field, is nutrient and organic matter loss. Certainly a lot of carbon is going into the air, and that's not going to be returned to the field in terms of organic matter with narrow windrow burning. And that's something that the farmer should take into account with their soil health goals and where their soil organic matter content is.
What effect might the weather have on narrow windrow burning?
Weather is a major factor and can be quite challenging with windrow burning. Extremes of weather are problematic. That would be rainy, damp conditions make narrow windrow burning just about impossible, as the narrow windrow does not stay aflame. It also lowers the temperatures of the windrow, which may not result in the death of the weed seeds that are contained in that windrow. When it's hot, dry, and windy, fire can get away from a farmer, and that's a very serious consideration that should be taken in place. The primary precaution the growers should take is just to make sure that the windrow and those flames can be kept under control. I would recommend consulting with the local fire chief or other authorities to make sure that burning is legal at that time of year under those weather conditions and is appropriate.
Now we'll discuss chaff carts as another harvest weed seed control method.
The goal of the chaff cart is simply to remove weed seeds from the field. It does this by collecting the chaff fraction and weed seeds that are contained in the chaff fraction as the harvester moves through the field. The chaff cart can then be dumped outside the field, thus removing potential problems in the future.
The chaff cart that you're using for your research doesn't look like a commercial cart. How would they differ in performance?
A commercial chaff cart will only capture the chaff fraction, and the straw fraction will be returned to the field as it moves through the field. Our chaff cart captures all of the field residues, which includes the chaff as well as the straw fraction. This is simply for research and testing purposes.
What should farmers consider before trying out a chaff cart?
A major challenge with the use of a chaff cart is adjusting the combine so that the weed seeds are separated into the chaff fraction that we are targeting and not blown into the straw fraction. When properly adjusted, however, over 95% of the weed seeds end up in the chaff fraction. Final consideration for chaff cart adoption is simply whether or not you can tow a trailer through your fields. This is simply not practical for some farmers.
Are harvest weed seed control tactics ready for growers to use now, or does more research still need to be done?
There is research from Australia as well as farmer adoption that indicates harvest weed seed control is a viable and economic tool for rigid ryegrass management in wheat. In the U.S., however, we have Italian ryegrass, which is a closely related but different species of ryegrass. Currently, more research needs to be conducted before adoption of harvest weed seed control is recommended to farmers in the U.S. for Italian ryegrass management in wheat. There is less evidence, but growing evidence, that harvest weed seed control is a useful tool for Palmer amaranth management. The last thing I would say is that a timely harvest is essential for the success of harvest weed seed control. If the seeds have already shattered and are on the ground, the combine is not going to pick those weed seeds up, and they're not going to be subject to harvest weed seed control. So the longer that harvest is delayed, more of those seeds are going to fall on the ground.
Are these methods a substitute for herbicides?
Harvest weed seed control techniques are not intended to replace herbicide application and a sound herbicide program. I would caution growers not to rely on harvest weed seed control as their sole weed management technique. It is much better to control weeds early, remove that competition from the crop, and thus realize the yield benefit, rather than waiting until the weed sets seed and trying to kill the seeds that have been set. With any new technique on a farm, I think it's important to try it on a small scale first and see if this is something that you like and can fit in your operation.
Thank you for watching today. For more information on harvest weed seed control as well as other integrated weed management techniques in the United States, please visit www.integratedweedmanagement.org.